I had been feeding a wolf out of a chipped clay cup for 4 months when he turned into a man in my kitchen. The cup was the second thing I noticed. The first was the size of him. I had nursed a wounded animal in a healer's cottage for 1 full season, watched him grow heavier and surer as the bones knit and the long red wound across his ribs closed to a clean white seam. And I had told myself he was only a very large wolf. He was not only a very large wolf. He was, on the morning of the first true thaw, a man, crouched naked on my hearthstones, with his hand still curled in the shape of a paw on the broth bowl, looking at me like the bowl was the only thing he was sure of in the room. "Wren," he said. I had not told him my name. I had said it aloud to him, of course. I had said a great many things to him over 4 months. Half of them complaints about the firewood, a quarter of them lullabies my mother had sung to wolves of an entirely different sort. The rest of it, the patient murmur a healer falls into when she is alone with something that cannot answer back. He had answered me only by setting his jaw on my knee in the evenings and looking up. But he had never once said my name. I set down the kettle. I am proud of that, in retrospect. The kettle was hot and full, and I did not drop it. "You can speak," I said. It was not the most useful sentence I had ever produced. Standing in the doorway of my own home, with my hair still in last night's braid, and a man on my floor who had been a wolf when I went to sleep, I did not think I should be judged too harshly for it. He looked down at the bowl. He looked at his own hand. He turned the hand over slowly, considering the palm, the knuckles, the long pale line of an old scar across the heel of it that I had last seen on a paw. Then he looked at me, and his face did the strangest thing I have ever seen a face do. It moved through grief and astonishment, and something I would later understand was apology, all in the time it takes to draw one breath. "I can speak," he said. His voice was rough as bark. "I am sorry." I am 22 years of age and a trained healer of the Black Pine Pack, the lowest ranked omega in a village that prides itself on having very little to be proud of. I have stitched a beater's shoulder closed with one hand while holding his teeth shut with the other. I have set a baby's collarbone before the baby finished crying. I had assumed that morning that nothing in my professional life could surprise me any more. I had been spectacularly mistaken. "Don't be sorry," I said, because nothing else would come. "Be clothed. I want to make one thing clear, because the whole village will eventually want to know, and I would rather you hear it from me. I did not save him out of any goodness particular to my soul. I saved him because he was bleeding into the snow at the edge of my woodpile, and I had been raised by a mother who would have stitched a wound on a tax collector if he had bled long enough. I dragged him onto the boar hide and into the cottage by his front legs, the way you move any heavy thing you cannot lift. I packed the wound with gold root and yarrow. I sewed 23 stitches by candlelight. I did not weep over him. I told him, several times and quite sternly, that if he died on my floor, I would leave a very poor impression on whichever god he intended to meet. He had not died. He had, instead, declined to leave. For the first 6 weeks I told myself this was sense. A wolf does not abandon a warm hearth in midwinter. And the wound had been deep, and he was still favouring the left foreleg. By the 8th week, when he was bringing me hares from the trapline and laying them at the door without a single tooth mark on the throat, I began to understand that I was being fed by him as much as I was feeding him. By the 12th week, when I came home from a birthing and he was waiting at the gate of the village with his ears pricked, the elders' wives stopped meeting my eye in the market. By the 4th month, I had stopped pretending I did not know what he was waiting for. I had only been waiting to see how long it would take. I had not, in any of my private guesses, predicted Alpha King. I should explain how I knew. He had told me his name was Torvald, sitting on my hearthstones, wrapped in the spare wool blanket I keep for emergencies, looking at the chipped cup as if it was something he meant to take with him when he left. I had said Torvald, the way one says any name one is testing in the mouth, and I had heard the small, low sound he made in his throat, not a growl, only a wolf's tired, pleased exhale, and I had known, with the cold, clean certainty of a stitch finally pulling tight, exactly which Torvald he was. Torvald the Iron, Alpha of the Iron Territories, who had ridden out alone after the death of his sister at the solstice and not been seen for half a year, whose pack had presumed him dead and whose advisers were already arranging the succession, whose name had been spoken in our village exactly twice in my lifetime, once when his mother had died, and once, last autumn, when the messenger had come to ask if any healer had seen a great black wolf with a wound across the ribs. We had told the messenger we had not. I had not lied. At the time, I had not. "Drink the broth," I said. He drank the broth. It is a remarkable thing to watch the King of the Iron Territories take direction from a healer's apprentice on a question of soup. He sat at my kitchen table in my father's old work shirt, the cuffs 3 inches short of his wrists, and he told me what had happened in pieces. He had ridden out after his sister's pyre in a state of mind he did not bother to defend to me. He had wanted distance. He had wanted to be a wolf for a while and stop being a king. He had crossed the western ridges and lost a fight he should have won. 3 of his sister's killers, who had been waiting along the hunting trail because they had known where he would go to grieve. He had killed 2 of them. The 3rd had gone west, across the river. He had bled until the bleeding became its own weather, and then he had run. "How did you find me?" I said. I sat across from him, with my hands wrapped around the chipped cup. The cup felt very important to be holding. "I did not find you." He did not lift his eyes from the table. "My wolf did. I let him have the body. He chose his direction. I was not paying attention." "To what?" "To anything." He said it the way a man says he was not paying attention to the road and admits, in the same breath, that he could have killed someone. I let the sentence sit. It seemed important not to fill the space he had made. After a while, he said, "He smelled you on the wind. Half a day out, he came toward you." "You're saying your wolf knew you?" "Yes. It is one matter to be told a thing of this scale by a stranger. It is another to be told it by a creature who has slept across your feet for 112 nights and learned the sound of your kettle. I felt the floor of the cottage become a little less reliable under my chair. "And you stayed in his form," I said, "after the wound was closed, after you were strong enough to leave." "Yes." "Why?" He looked up finally. His eyes were the same as they had been when he was a wolf, that pale winter grey. And the recognition in them was the same too. Only now it had a man behind it. And the man was very tired. "Because I would not have known what to say to you, Wren," he said, "if I had stood up like this on your floor in November. I did not have the words then. I am not certain I have them now." I did not answer that. I stood up. I went to the window. I looked at the trees because I needed to not look at him. In the woodshed across the yard, on the chopping block, was an axe I had taken from his teeth 6 weeks ago. He had carried it from somewhere in the deep wood and laid it at my feet and refused to be praised for it. I had assumed he had stolen it from a hunter. I had used it to split kindling all winter. The axe head, I now noticed, bore an iron wolf sigil stamped into the steel just above the haft. 3 guardsmen rode into my yard 4 days later. I had been hanging laundry. The riders came up the track at a hard pace, in dark green cloaks with the iron wolf at the throat. And at their head rode a woman I did not recognise, and would never forget. Tall, pale-haired, in furs the colour of fresh cream, with a face built precisely to be looked at. She drew rein in my yard without asking permission, and looked at the cottage door as if she meant to walk through it, whether I opened it or not. "I am here," she said, "for the king." I set the wet linen back into the basket. I dried my hands on my apron, slowly, because I had learned long ago that slow hands made unpractised people uneasy. "There is no king in this house," I said. "There is a man in this house. He is the king. We have come to bring him home." She had not yet dismounted. She looked at me as if I were a step she did not wish to put her boot on. Her name, when she gave it, was Lady Halverdine. She had been raised at the king's court since girlhood. She had been considered, by the king's late mother, and by the king's surviving advisers, and by Lady Halverdine herself, the natural choice for Luna of the Iron Territories. She had, in his absence, been managing his household. She told me all of this in the yard, in front of the laundry, with the air of a woman who had not been required to introduce herself in some years, and was finding it wearing. "You are very efficient," I said. She did not flinch. She smiled at me with her teeth. "You will pack his belongings." "He has no belongings here," I said, which was almost true. There was the cup, and the boar hide, and one wool blanket, but I did not feel that any of those things were properly his. The cottage door opened behind me. He did not say anything. He came down the step in my father's old shirt, which fit him as poorly as it had on the first day, and he stopped at my shoulder. I have thought, since, about how that moment looked from her saddle. From hers, it was the runaway king in a shirt 3 inches too short, standing 1 pace behind a barefoot omega in a wet apron, and not stepping past her. It was, by the standards of the Iron Territories, a small public scandal. From mine, it was a man working out whether he was permitted to stand where he was standing. "Halverdine," he said, in the voice he had used the first morning, the bark wrath one. "Go home." "Your Grace, I am coming, in my own time. Go home." He had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. The eldest of the guardsmen wheeled his horse without being told. Lady Halverdine sat very still on her mare for the length of 3 breaths, looking from the king, to me, to the chipped cup of broth I had left on the windowsill that morning, and not yet brought inside. She saw the cup. I watched her see it. I watched her decide what she meant to do about it. "As you say, Your Grace," she said, and turned her horse and rode out of my yard in the slow, controlled walk of someone refusing to gallop where she could be seen. When the hoofbeats had died, he said, very quietly, "I have brought this to your door." "Yes," I said. "I am sorry." "Stop saying that." He looked at me. I looked at the laundry. Behind us, the cup on the windowsill caught the light. "You will need to come with me," he said. I had known this for 4 days. I had known it in some long buried part of me for 4 months. "I will come," I said, "on one condition." "Name it." "Bring the cup." He brought the cup. If you have stayed with me this far, please do. The part I am about to tell you is the part I still do not entirely know how to say. If the story is finding you tonight, I would be glad of your company through the end of it, and if you have not yet, the small kindness of following along would mean more to me than I can say in this voice. Stay close. The iron fortress was older than my village by 1,000 years, and I had not been prepared for any of it. The walls were black stone, shot through with seams of pale rock, like a thing that had been broken and made to hold. The great hall was the size of 3 barns end to end, with a wolf throne at the head of it, carved out of one piece of mountain oak, and a hearth in the wall so wide that the king's hounds slept in it during winter without crowding one another. The iron court rose when he entered. Every face in the hall turned. Every gaze, in the same instant, slid past him to me, to my plain wool, my healer's bag, my hand wrapped around the strap of it, as if I might be asked to leave at short notice. I had spent 4 months feeding a wolf out of a chipped cup. I had not spent any of those months being looked at by 97 nobles at the same time. "This is Wren of Black Pine," the king said. He said it the way you place a stone in a wall. "She has my life in her hands. She is welcome here as long as she chooses to stay." The court understood, all at once and without anyone needing to explain it, that the question of who would be Luna of the Iron Territories had not, after all, been decided by Lady Halverdine in the king's absence. There was a soft sound through the hall, not a gasp, only the small collective intake of 97 people revising their plans for the season. I did not curtsy. I had not been raised to curtsy. I inclined my head the way a healer does to a patient she means to treat well, and I felt his hand, very briefly, at the small of my back, steadying me. It was the first time he had touched me in his man's shape. He withdrew the hand at once. I felt the absence of it, a clean, specific cold, all the way to the table at which he meant to sit me down. The first weeks at the fortress were a slow education in what had been hidden from me by his silence. He had been writing letters. He had not sent them. The adviser who showed me the desk, with a careful neutrality that I recognized as either kindness or strategy, opened the lowest drawer with a small iron key and showed me a stack of folded parchment, 12 sheets, all addressed to the same place, to the healer at the cottage on Black Pine Ridge. None of them sent. The earliest was dated 3 days after he had walked out of my kitchen as a man. I read 2 of them. I closed the drawer. I sat in his chair for a long time, looking at the chipped cup which I had set on the corner of his desk on my first day, and which he had not asked me to move. He had not been able to write to me what he could not say to me. I understood sitting there that the man I had been feeding broth to had been working out in his wolf's body how to be a person again. He had not stayed because he could not leave. He had stayed because he did not know how to come into a room without breaking it. And my room had been the first one in a year that had not asked him to be a king. The court did not give us peace. Lady Halverdine made her second move at the spring banquet. She rose with her cup in her hand at the third toast, smiling the public smile of a woman who had made her peace with disappointment. She wished the king's chosen healer good health. She wished her long life. She wished, with great delicacy, that the king's recovery had not been so prolonged that questions had begun to be asked among the older houses about the nature of the wound, about what kind of injury would keep an alpha in his wolf's form for a full season against all custom. Whether perhaps, she said, an injury of the spirit, whether perhaps a working, whether perhaps a healer, even an unwitting one, who had bound a king to her hearth in his weakened state by means a noble court would not name aloud. The hall went still. She had not accused me. She had only suggested the shape of the accusation and let the older houses decide whether to fill it in. I felt the king go absolutely motionless beside me. I felt his hand begin to close on the arm of his chair. I put my own hand very lightly on his wrist. "Lady Halverdine," I said. I did not stand. I was not going to give her the satisfaction of standing. "I bound nothing," I said. "I sewed a wound shut in candlelight. I fed him out of a clay cup with a chip in the rim. The chip was there before he came. He drank from it because it was what I had. If you would like to inspect the cup, it is on the king's desk. You may hold it. You will find it is only a cup." I did stand then. Not for her, for the cup. I was very, very angry, and my anger had always wanted somewhere useful to go. As for the question of why a king kept his wolf's form for a season, perhaps you might ask him. He is sitting beside me. He is not a curse. He is a man who lost his sister. He grieved in the only shape that did not require him to speak. I do not require any noble house to find that comfortable. I require only that no one in this hall accuse me of witchcraft for stitching shut a wound that would have killed him. I sat down. The king had not moved. The hall had not moved. Then, very slowly, the king rose from his chair, and he walked the length of the high table, and he stopped in front of Lady Halverdine, and he said, in a voice the whole hall heard, "I owe Wren of Black Pine my life. You have suggested otherwise in the hearing of my court. You will make your apology now, or you will leave this hall and this fortress before the hour is out. The choice is yours. I will not make it for you." She made her apology. It was not a graceful one. I did not require a graceful one. Her face as she spoke it was the face of a woman who had understood, finally and completely, that she had lost a battle she had been raised to believe she could not lose. She left the hall at the end of the banquet. She left the fortress within the week. She went, I was told later, to her family's holdings in the south, where she would in due course marry a southern alpha who would consider himself fortunate. I never saw her again.
That was the shape of his public acknowledgement of me before any title was given. He defended me before he claimed me. He stood up for me before he asked anything of me. I saw, watching him return to his seat, that he had been waiting all his life for someone to require him to do exactly that, and that no one ever had. The bond settled in me one night in the library in early summer, and it almost killed me. I should have anticipated it. The wolf had recognized me 4 months before the man had been able to speak, and a recognition of that magnitude does not arrange itself politely into a man's timing. I had been reading by the fire, one of his books, a treatise on field stitching that was, frankly, behind the times, and he had been across the room at the desk, and I had looked up because the air had changed. He was not at the desk. He was on his feet. His hand had braced against the bookshelf. His face had gone the colour of old iron. "Torvald?" I said. He shook his head. He could not speak. I went to him. I put my hand on his arm. The bond came through my palm like cold water. I had not been prepared for it. I had been told, in my training, that a fated mate bond settled gradually, in tendrils, over weeks. This one had been waiting a year. It came through the contact in one long, unbroken flood. A man's grief for his dead sister, kept in his wolf's shape because his man's shape had not been able to hold it. The loneliness of a kingdom run by an empty chair. The nights in my cottage when he had laid his head on my knee and counted my breathing because counting his own had been unbearable. The writing of 12 letters he had not been able to send. It was not a kind bond. It was a bond that had been made to wait too long. I felt the cold drive into my bones, as if I was standing barefoot in the snow where he had fallen. I felt my ribs ache with the wound I had stitched. I felt his year compress into one long breath I could not finish. I did not let go of him. I want this to be clear. I did not let go. Not when my knees gave. Not when the cold went up under my breastbone. Not when I tasted iron at the back of my throat. He was trying to pull his arm away, to spare me, I think, or to spare himself the indignity of being witnessed, and I held on. "Stay," I said. "Stay. Let it through. I have you." He let it through. It took a long time. I do not know how long. When it was done, my hand had gone numb, and the fire had burned down to coals, and his forehead was resting against mine, and he was breathing, finally, the way a person breathes who has remembered how. "Wren," he said. It was the second time he had said my name. It sounded different than the first. "I know," I said. He kissed me then, in his library, beside the burned-down fire, and I am not going to tell you what the kiss felt like, because what it felt like was not a thing that belongs to a noble court, or a sister, or an audience. It belonged to me. What I will tell you is that something I had been carrying since I was 8 years old set itself down inside me, very quietly, as if it had been waiting only to be told it could. He drew back. He looked at me as if he did not entirely believe I was there. "I have nothing to give you," he said.
that is not already yours. Give me the chair beside yours, I said. He gave me the chair beside his. The Iron Court witnessed our claiming at midsummer. He spoke the words in front of the wolf throne, and I spoke mine, and the hall, the same hall that had nearly let Lady Halverdine accuse me of witchcraft, bent its head, every head in it, in the old gesture of a pack to its Luna. I did not weep. I had not wept on the night I dragged him out of the snow, and I did not weep on the day I was crowned, and I think this is part of why his court eventually came to love me. I am not, by temperament, a weeping woman. I am a woman who finishes what she starts. A year on, I am sitting at the long oak table in our private chamber, writing this for myself, because the King's chronicler asked me for an official account, and I will not give him one. The chipped clay cup is in front of me. It holds at present a cutting of rosemary from the kitchen garden that he planted in the spring as a gift I did not ask for. Outside in the courtyard, he is teaching a half-wild yearling wolf, a foundling brought to us last month, to take meat from his hand. He is doing it badly. The wolf is winning. I can hear through the open window the small, low sound he made on my hearthstones the morning he turned into a man. Only now it is a laugh, and it is the only laugh I have ever heard him make in front of anyone but me. He looks up. He sees me at the window. He inclines his head. Not the bow of a king, not the nod of an Alpha to his Luna, just the small, private gesture of a man who has caught his wife watching him, and goes back to losing his argument with the yearling. The cup is only a cup. The chip in the rim is the chip that was always there. But I will tell you this, since you have stayed with me to the end. There are a great many things in the Iron Fortress that are made of gold, or iron, or carved oak, or polished horn. There is a wolf throne the size of a wagon. There are tapestries that took 10 women a year to weave. There is a crown, the thing the king carried himself on the morning we left my cottage for the fortress, was a chipped clay cup wrapped in my second-best handkerchief. He carried it the whole long ride. He did not let me carry it. He set it on his desk on the first day, and he has not let it leave that desk for any reason since, except for the morning he filled it with rosemary in the garden, and brought it to me. A king is a man who has been taught what to value. My husband is a man who learned, in a healer's cottage on Black Pine Ridge, that the most valuable thing in his kingdom was a cup with a chip in the rim, and the woman who fed him out of it, because it was what she had. Tell me, when did you know it was him? Was it the axe in the woodshed, or earlier? Stay a while. Tell me where you are listening from. I would be glad to know who has been keeping me company tonight. And if the story has warmed something in you, leave a small word below, and follow along. There is more of us, his side and mine, on the sister channels both. The cup is on the desk. The hearth is lit. Come back any time.